Right, good morning still. Hope everyone's enjoying it so far. Thank you for sticking around with us following the break. I'm delighted to be joined today by Dan Doney, who's the Chief Technology Officer of DTCC Digital, and also Jørgen Ouaknine, who is the Head of Innovation and Digital Assets at Euroclear. Myself, Mark Nichols, I co-lead our digital asset practice and consulting business at EY. And wow, what a great 9 months it's been for this industry. There's been an awful lot going on. There's a lot of progress that's been made. But where I wanted to start really was to let Dan and Jørgen really introduce what Euroclear and DTCC are to the digital asset ecosystem, given their key role in the traditional financial infrastructure that exists today. So maybe I'll turn to Jørgen first, and can you sort of talk us through a little bit, what does digital assets mean to Euroclear, the role you're trying to play within the ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. Very happy to be with you all, and first of all, a big thank to Chainlink, because I think it's quite unique to be able to bring like two huge traditional institutions like DTCC and Euroclear on stage, and try to bridge the gap between DeFi and TradFi. So just to put things a bit in perspective, we are a financial market infrastructure, and we are systemic to the job we do. And I like to basically try to have a business conversation around everything digital assets and traditional assets. And just to put things in perspective a bit more, I think 4 years ago, we had like 36 trillion euro of assets under custody. And today, 4 or 5 years later, we have 42 trillion of assets of custody. It means that we have grown more than the full crypto industry over the next 5 years. So what we're trying to basically say is we are embracing this change. We believe we should basically be able to service any kind of assets, should this be traditional assets, digital assets, and make it a seamless journey for our ecosystem. That's a very important point.
And Dan, how about DTCC?
So a central securities depository that we're both a part of is effectively the consensus model for the securities market. It's the place where all the records must agree to have a complete record of ownership. And over time, we've gone from T+7 down to T+1, and we're looking ahead to a T+0 world. So as the consensus model for financial markets, we look at blockchain, and we both see it either as an existential threat, there's a better way to do consensus, or an enormous opportunity to retool as we target T+0 in the end. We see it as an opportunity, both of our organizations. We're looking to leverage the way that, and change the way that financial markets work using this technology. There's really not a better conduit than our organizations. So Jørgen mentioned 43 trillion in assets. We represent $100 trillion worth of assets. And really by working together, we are at the center of the financial ecosystem. And by using partners like Chainlink, we're able to move, I think, very quickly and completely update financial markets to use these new tools. So we're excited about the opportunities, and we think that we're a critical part of the future of blockchain financial markets for some important reasons. When our organizations were formed, there were many different financial records that existed broadly through transfer agents in our market. And every institution had to interact with all of those various ledgers in order to be able to produce a record. And that's why we had T+7 settlement, and that was falling behind. It couldn't handle the scale of markets. So they set up an organization. In our case, we're a DAO. We're actually owned by the financial markets as a core infrastructure element that provides that single consensus layer for the various markets. This tool, or this DAO, ultimately through blockchain, it can be transformed into the new financial market. So we're excited about the opportunities there.
Maybe to add something on that, and I think it's quite interesting. We have been created ourselves like 6 decades ago, and you can imagine how many things have changed over the 6 decades. And guess what? Euroclear has always been here to support the growth of the capital markets through any kind of innovation you can imagine, Should it be technological, financial, or even crisis? And the future is not going to be any different of that. What's really challenging today is the pace of innovation. And as much as we are incumbents, we have to think as well about the ecosystem we take together with us in this journey. And we have to become the change agents that are going to support this transition to a more, where you have more convergence between traditional and DLT. And where is bridge?
And so maybe to pick you guys up on this a little bit. So we've got $143 trillion. I guess it'll be more than that because your number's going to be euros. So let's go something north of $150 trillion of assets on the stage. We've got this convergence of the digital asset ecosystem with the traditional financial ecosystem. Are Euroclear and DTCC competitors, or are you collaborators as we move to this new, more agile market infrastructure?
Well, collaborators without a doubt. So you can't move, right? Global markets, financial markets are becoming more and more global. So there's a need, they have a different regulator than we do. Across jurisdictions, we face very different customer bases. So in that way, we don't step on each other's turf, but we have the same set of problems. So I mentioned how we had all of these diverse ledgers when our organizations were created. Guess what? That's replaying itself. The old is the new, as we see a proliferation of distributed ledgers. And the need to unify these ledgers across jurisdictions, across asset classes, is as real as it has ever been. By collaborating on these challenges, we can create a truly global market with shared data, with value that can move across borders efficiently. And that's why we're tackling these problems together.
So definitely, we are collaborators. And let's look back a little bit to what happened, in the last 3-4 years in the digital asset space. We have seen a proliferation of initiatives. And that's great because it has built solid expertise and knowledge in the market. And guess what? Despite the lack of adoption and volumes, still, nobody's backing up. They're continuing on the journey. But I think, there has been a shift quite recently because it marks the end of siloed initiatives. That's over. Either you are creating bridges to connect people and connect assets, and with Unified Ledger where you have the money, you have the securities, you have the data sitting in the same place, but every siloed initiative now has to come to an end. So it's an era for collaboration. That's most important. I think, DTCC and us, together with Clearstream, we kind of embodied that in the work we did around the digital asset securities control principle. Because of our size and our role, people come to us and they would like to collaborate. And we do welcome them with open arms. But at some point, the conversation needs to have some structure. So, we establish a set of principles. It's fair to say, okay, thank you very much for your ID. Are you regulated? No, I don't know, maybe soon. What's your take on asset protection? These are things that are core to our heart. What's your take on cyber resilience? So, this set of principles are basically giving to everyone out there a kind of roadmap to the pot of gold, the real-world assets. Everyone is coming to try to understand how we can tokenize that. And we have shown the way, and we're going to publish a new version of it, which is double-clicking on one of the most fundamental problems we're trying to solve, interoperability and governance.
Yeah, and you guys are working on some really amazing stuff, so thank you from behalf of the industry as a whole for the work that you guys are doing. But if we take a little step back, so we're here to talk about unified ledgers. So do we think we're going to end up with a single unified ledger? Or is this about an interoperability play? Is it about standards? And is it about making everything so they can connect to each other? I know, Dan, this is a topic close to your heart, so maybe I'll turn to you first.
Well, there's a physics problem. There can't be one ledger in the end because of the trilemma. So if you want to get to T0, that means all transactions settle nearly instantly, which means every ledger must agree on ownership stake. If you want one, that's easy if you have only one ledger, but then you're limited to somewhere between 1 to 10,000 transactions per second. That's not going to cut it. That means transactions have to go somewhere else. So in the end, there will be a ledger of ledgers or a network of distributed ledgers. And there's a need to then produce ground truth from that network of distributed ledgers, layer 1, layer 2. We call this layer N, where value and data can move freely between the various distributed ledgers that are able to then scale to, we think, 1 trillion or a million transactions per second is going to be necessary to support full T0.
So you said 1 billion transactions per second.
1 million transactions per second.
I just wanted to make sure I heard the number correctly. Jørgen, anything that you would add to that?
So I fully agree. There's not going to be one to rule them all. That's kind of very clear and making consensus amongst, I believe, most of us. Nevertheless, we see still that depending on the geographies, even depending on the use cases, you might have different places. And why the unified ledger concept is quite appealing, we can see that everyone is trying to work on that, and we see more public and private, consortium coming to life now. Working on this is far from being easy. And then it comes back to what are you trying to solve for? And, we can spend hours trying to discuss and define interoperability. Is it the ability to move a token from one place to another? Is it connecting supply and demand? Is it going over legal fragmentation? And all these topics are quite, of importance. So in Europe, we have, new initiatives, led by the ECB, trying to figure out the unified ledger topic. We see as well other initiatives out there. I think they're all solving part of the issue, and we need to connect now all the dots. And I think, thanks to the great collaboration we're having, we'll be able to support the overall journey towards a more unified ledger, or unified ledgers. I think the S is super important.
Yeah, that is a critical, and folks should recognize what a CSD is responsible for. In a given market, the ownership state at a specific point in time is the job of a CSD. We must, when you pay a dividend or do shareholder voting, you can't double count who's holding those individual shares. So the fact that my son is due 2 cents for his Microsoft shares as a dividend payment, the system has to support that all the way to the edge so that every share is accounted for and everyone is treated fairly. So as value is distributed across many distributed ledgers and is moving frequently, recognize the challenge there of observing that ownership state so that there is no double counting. That's ultimately what CSDs do, and that's really the unified ledger of ledgers that we're responsible for in the end.
I appreciate, Dan, we speak here about CSD, but it might not be a very popular topic in this kind of conferences, but we're happy to explain the value of a CSD, the importance of a CSD whenever you want after this, this panel.
And Jørgen, you hit a little bit on the European sort of readiness, where we are in the European markets. And Dan, I'd love to hear a little bit from your perspective where we are in the US markets. Obviously, we're seeing certain announcements from other sort of market infrastructure players, exchanges around tokenization of assets, existing assets that are on traditional rails moving on-chain. I'd love to get a sense from each of you as to how you see the current state of the regulatory environment, market environment, readiness as a whole in your respective regions. Appreciating, Jørgen, that you do live and work here in the United States as well.
Well, clearly, the last 9 to 10 months has been very exciting in the US markets. So the regulatory, the growing regulatory clarity has been a huge unlock for the markets. You can see the impact as the US is all in on blockchain. And that's causing every institution, every major financial player, their boards, as we discussed, they are focused on distributed ledgers and how they can deliver value to their customers. In the same way that regulatory clarity is important as an unlock, Jørgen pointed this out, the principles of control. How do you recover value that's lost or stolen or misappropriated? How do you make sure that there's a proper record of ownership end to end? Setting those principles is also a big unlock, and it's part of our responsibility to the market as we work with technology providers like Chainlink, is to make sure that there is that clarity which allows the markets to move forward quickly. You see both of our entities moving aggressively into these marketplaces to provide clarity for the ecosystem, really supporting our core roles in these ecosystems, so that you can unlock the innovation and make sure that it's done in a way that's safe and secure for the end investors.
I think, we have to give a lot of credit to the regulators on the work they have done over the past years. I think the progress that has been made on CBDC, stablecoins, MiCA regulation, Genius Act, you name it, are all building on each other to basically improve what somehow is missing from one regulation to the other. And I think that's great to see how each geography get inspired by the other, and the acceleration that it pushes, obviously going more towards the tokenized world. Now we have to be aware as well that there is a speed race not to be missed. So you might want to innovate, but if you're not going at the right pace with what's happening in the market and being connected to this new reality, it might get out of sync. And this is where it starts to become more complicated. When I see the progress that has been made and the way the regulators are leading in discussion, creating the right ground and the right framework for all that is super supportive. But I would as well mention that the job we have to do inside organizations is super critical to be able to adapt ourselves to the 24/7 and tokenized world business. We have to appreciate that this is not necessarily something everyone is used to. So while everyone is doing things either in production or the level of scale is not here there to have a full transformation at the organization level. I think the work we have been doing with the Global Blockchain Business Council on the risk mitigation framework is super important, because that's basically level setting. What kind of new risk do we have to cope with? How can an organization get ready for that? And somehow that seems to be a tipping point. When that starts to become a center of attention, is showing that this might be the year that we're going to see the scale and adoption.
Yeah, it is interesting. There is jurisdictional FOMO to some degree, but even as there's pressure to move forward quickly, keep in mind the responsibility in these markets. So we saw a major hack yesterday, hacks earlier this year with over $1 billion worth of value lost. Those are small markets by comparison to the markets that we're responsible for. So you could imagine if you've got $100 trillion or $150 trillion worth of assets on chain, and there's a major hack of $1 trillion, that would bring down an economy. So we have to do better than that. That's part of the responsibility of governance in these models. As we move forward at breakneck speed, we have to do so in a way that is proper and recoverable. And for example, the principles of digital asset security control principles are a piece of that. As all of these pieces fit into place, you're going to see rapid acceleration of the markets. We know that that's true, but we have to do so with proper controls.
Maybe just to add on that, because I think it's super important to highlight that. Getting Euroclear, Clearstream, and DTCC to work together for the greater good of the market, supporting the adoption and advancing of digital assets, that's super critical. If you look at the GBBC work we're doing on the risk mitigation framework, we're adding as well crypto-native companies, layer ones, and others to come together. And that's exactly like we are here in this room all together from different horizons, different viewpoints. We might not necessarily agree, but that's the power of the new conversation we have to get. We realize we need to build on each other, we need to collaborate if we actually want these conversions to happen and for every one of us to be able to win in a significant way in this tokenized world.
And it's interesting, as we go and talk to the boards and the senior leadership of traditional financial institutions, they always talk about their 3 priorities. If you go back 12 months, AI was maybe just about on that agenda. Digital assets was not really on that agenda. It was a bit like, don't talk to me about AI, apart from a few firms. But if you now look today, you go and meet with them, it is all about AI, it's all about digital assets, and it's then pick one other thing that's relevant to that organization. But the common themes are always those 2 topics. And it's fascinating, as they think about governance, they think about the risks in this ecosystem, but they also think about the commercial opportunity that they're seeing. And they're all coming hard at this. So it's going to be really important and really interesting to see how it evolves with your traditional member base and your constituents really coming into the digital asset ecosystem, and then the role that you guys can play. Which brings me to a question around, where do you see your organizations truly playing? And I know we've hit on this a few times, but what are those really exciting opportunities that you see for you to play, for you to not, maybe it's not necessarily a revenue opportunity always, maybe it's a little bit of just enablement for the industry. But what are those things? Maybe start with Dan.
So the first critical piece is we're looking to tokenize our $100 trillion in assets. So we're building out that framework on an aggressive schedule to make that possible, so that parties, if you want your shares of Apple or Microsoft or your ETF in token form in your wallet, we are working aggressively on that rollout, and news to follow. That's an enabler. Because now what that does is puts high-quality assets with the full rights of the securities entitlements on blockchain rails. That makes it a place where market makers can park value and can execute transactions, which will do a lot for the liquidity of these markets. At the same time, getting tokens is the beginning, but it's equally important to have really powerful applications, especially for institutional finance, at the same time. So we're rolling out a series of effectively institutional DeFi applications that are designed to unlock liquidity. Some really elegant smart contract frameworks. If you've seen the work that we did in the Great Collateral Experiment and how we use DeFi protocols for collateral management and lending, that's an exciting part of the future. But in the end, it comes down to governance. It's the most boring thing that's out there, but ultimately, what makes our organizations tick is that the regulators look to see how we make decisions. How do we decide on this ledger versus that ledger, or this technology for key management, et cetera? There's a rigorous process to make sure that people aren't making decisions willy-nilly. And that's in the end what keeps markets safe. We're trust agents who are closely overseen as we execute our market responsibilities. We're bringing those frameworks to the broader financial markets, really to the DeFi world, as we work together to unlock this new model. So it's that governance that we need to do together as we shape the broader ecosystem. That's probably our principal role.
So, George, just going back on your point around AI, and because we participated together on a project with Chainlink around corporate action lifecycle management called Calm. And that's showing you don't have to pick both. You can actually amplify DLT and AI together. And I think, the ChatGPT moment that happened end of 2022 only could happen because there was a level of readiness that our institution, did, by hiring chief data officers, data scientists, investing in cloud. And when you had the right rails in place, whenever this moment happened, you could see the big competitor being able to react and go to market quite quickly. So the readiness was the key part. I think, to summarize a little bit, how we see things, definitely, as I told, we want to be the gateway for our clients to their assets, whether it's traditional, whether it's on-chain, managing the user experience in a safe and sound way, together with these infrastructures. I think digital assets are ready for prime time, and Euroclear will definitely host, or at least co-host the show when this moment comes.
So we heard it here first. Agentic, on-chain, programmable assets enabled by your firms is the future of digital assets and maybe financial market infrastructure. We should capture that somehow.
Trademark it, brother.
There we go. So as we come to our last 45 seconds, I'm going to give you each a rapid fire. What's your advice or your ask of the builders, the developers, and the constituents that are in this room as it relates to unified ledgers, digital assets, and your respective businesses?
The main advice is institutions have a role. They're trust agents, and while blockchain networks are trustless, ultimately there needs to be accountability in the ecosystem, so they're good partners, not the enemy in the end. And we see vice versa. We're excited about bringing DeFi technologies to institutional settings and working with the many idea creators that are out there.
I think, over the last years, we have done a big part of our job getting, strong expertise on DLT, digital assets, and your crypto native world. I would encourage you to as well make a step towards us, understand better what our job is in the financial market system, and try to find a way to collaborate and get closer. We're open arms. We welcome you all for collaboration, but let's find the right way to communicate and collaborate.
Great. Thank you both, Jørgen, Dan. Collaboration seems to be the word here. Let's collaborate more and let's do some really cool stuff. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.